SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show, with hundreds of events listed, live concerts, sporting events, and so much more. Go on to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code Snake Sports Talk Show, and save yourself $20 off your
Live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts right now.
Here we go on a spectacular Saturday for you folks. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. Live in the city that doesn't sleep, in the 702 in Las Vegas. iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram. Those are the medias you can like, follow, subscribe, and keep you up to date on future and past shows. So, exciting stuff. I will tell you, there's going to be exciting announcements coming next Friday from now. So, hold on to your seats. There's going to be exciting stuff, so don't miss that. NASCAR weekend this weekend. So, any of you who are going to be down there on the track at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, I hope all of you guys drink responsibly, and at the same time, it's going to be some fun stuff, but unfortunately, no Chase Elliott this weekend. So, dealing with a leg injury, but still going to have some jam-packed action going on the Speedway. Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins joining us along with Stacey, Gotsulias from Locked On Yankees. It's going to be a real fun show. So, I wanted to start with this because, I scroll through and I always like to keep myself up to date when it comes to sporting updates and so on and so forth. Now, of course, yesterday it was deadline day, which I will be honest with you, there was about a couple of some decent moves that happened in the deadline, but man, before the deadline day, those last couple of days, we were busy, but some great moves. But I wanted to really discuss with, there was a conversation that was made on ESPN's First Take, and everybody, as you all know, Stephen A. Smith and company, also Michael Kay, who is the voice of the Yankees when it comes to television broadcast, really nice guy. But there was a topic of discussion that I really wanted to shed some light on before we bring up Hunter. And one of the things is that, first of all, we know a ton of people don't always watch hockey, but they usually go to the games. It's very energetic. It's so much fun. I've gone to about 16 Golden Knights games in my lifetime, even gone to a playoff game, and it was so much fun. T-Mobile Arena is jam-packed and energetic. But one of the things that was talked about was New York sports, and that's all of them. But yet, a couple of their analysts, and only one of them, Michael Kay, brought up this point because, he talks a lot about the Yankees. But this was a topic of discussion I really wanted to kind of put in somebody's place. Here's where we'll roll the tape.
I have a good one. I think it's an interesting one. Which team in New York do you think wins a championship next?
Rangers. Oh, Lord. Come on, Patrick Kane is able.
They don't count. Take
They
it
don't
out.
count.
They don't count.
Only
for
thing I
Stephen
know
A.
about hockey is that the puck is black,
Okay.
and I love Gary Bettman. That's my buddy,
For
who I owe a
purposes
trip
for
to the
Stephen
hockey
A.
game.
Right.
It is no disrespect to the Rangers and to Patrick Kane, of course, but just for Stephen
Football,
A.
basketball, baseball.
Yeah.
No disrespect? It kind of seemed like it was. You're telling me you want to put a hockey franchise on the back burner, which, let me be honest with you, I've traveled to New York 6 times in my life. I've seen everything that there needs to be. I've been up to Long Island. I have been up to several places. I have gone to Manhattan, even in Grand Central Park, and I have been around it. Okay, I have family that lives there. Here's the one thing I will tell you about New York sports, and it's exciting time if you are a New York fan. Because first of all, The Yankees, we always know they spend all their top dollar money because they're spoiled and there's no salary cap in baseball. It's the same I could say for the New York Mets. The other part of it is the Knicks are the Knicks until James Dolan decides to sell the team. And then you look at this past year where the Giants, they only had one winning season in 10 years before Brian Dable came along as a head coach. And Daniel Jones, which I'll be honest, I ain't paying him more than 45 million a year. You must be out of your gourd to think that. I think honestly has to be some type of clarity with this. But during the tenure, first of all, Yankees haven't won a World Series since 2009. They have been to the playoffs multiple times, but sometimes they would get upset, whether it's in the first round, the second round, or even in the ALCS. Okay, ask them, how easy was it to get past the Houston Astros? It never is, because the Astros have built themselves a powerhouse, which nobody likes because of the fact of, one, they still are stuck on that banging garbage cans and such. Well, they won a World Series without Carlos Correa and without AJ Hinch. And of course, they reloaded. Get over it. I know it was a hot topic back in 2017, but we're past it. My other thing is, too, the Mets, yes, they've been to the World Series in 2015, but it didn't work out for them because Kansas City got red hot and the Royals won the World Series. And what did the Mets do since then? Yes, they've been competitive. Offense went flat, and you're asking a lot from Jacob deGrom to really bail this team out. The other thing is they won 100 games last year, and they got eliminated in the first round. How do you think that really feels for them? I know the Mets and the Yankees are the team that's rising up. Oh, and let's not forget the New York Knicks made the playoffs in a COVID year. Okay? If you looked at the talent top to bottom, it is real young. Now, I'm not banging on any of the players because I like RJ Barrett, I do like Obi Toppin, and I do like a couple of their youngsters, but the Knicks will still be themselves. All it is it only pertains to if James Dolan really wants to do the right thing, which honestly, I doubt that's going to happen, and the Knicks are not going to get further and further in the Eastern Conference. That is just my personal take. And the Giants had one winning season before Brian Dable showed up in 10 years. You look at them now, it's a much better structure. Now, the only thing they have to deal with is the Daniel Jones contract because he wants more than 45 million a year. I think he's a 36, 38 million a year kind of guy. That's my personal opinion because I'm not going to risk losing Saquon Barkley, who the first time ever in his career had a full-length season on his belt. I'm not going to risk that. Plus, you need wide receivers. I know Kenny Golladay has been a ghost in that organization. And then let's not forget about the Jets, who I love Sauce Gardner. I love a lot of their young guys. I love Robert Saleh and even Garrett Wilson. But they're a quarterback away from even being competitive in a loaded AFC conference. But what did the Rangers and the Islanders do from the 10 years that they had? Well, first of all, after John Tavares departed and went to Toronto for 7 years, Islanders had been competitive in the Eastern Conference. Now, they didn't get over the hump to get to the Stanley Cup. They were very close, but they still managed to be competitive under a very competitive coach in Barry Trotz. And then the Rangers, yes, they had some losing seasons after they got rid of Rick Nash, after they got rid of Ryan McDonough, after they got rid of a lot of guys, and they reloaded. Artemi Panarin. Now this team is loaded. You got Mika Zibanejad, who's real good, and he's the promising future. Adam Fox, Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, and you have a hyper-aggressive offensive coach in Gerard Gallant, and you're going to throw the Rangers in a back burner like this? First of all, do you know at all the injuries that hockey players literally go through? And we're looking at every one of the major sports in America. First of all, NFL, NBA, and NHL all have a salary cap. The only ones who are spoiled out there are Major League Baseball. They don't have a salary cap. Could you imagine if hockey actually made the salary that baseball does? I mean, you wouldn't even be having topics of discussions. Players would be happy. owners would probably have to figure a lot of things out in their organization, and equipment wouldn't be this ridiculously expensive. Ask a goaltender how much equipment really costs nowadays. It's expensive. All right. So we want to show a little more love and support and respect. I like Stephen A. I don't again, I don't bash him for this, but was a take that I was willing to defend because, first of all, the Rangers are in the up and coming. The Yankees right now, they spend a lot of their money, but when they're injury plagued and their offense is inconsistent and pitching's not working their way, they are not a World Series championship team. That is my true opinion, and that is what I've seen from this team. And the Mets, they're just getting better and they're getting younger. And we all know this is a time of year they have to get over that hump in their division in the NL East. And they also got to get past a lot of different NL teams around. So the Rangers are literally a step closer. And as of what I saw from the trade deadline, this is cup or nothing for them because you're talking about a Boston team that's really good. First team at from 61 games to get to 100 points, and they extended David Pastrnak, and they got two really good players, Tyler Pertuzzi and Dmitry Orlov. So this is the time where the Rangers really have to get red hot. We love it. We love it this time of year. We've wrapped up February. Now we're in March, few games out, and when April, May comes around the corner, watch out. I'm going to be glued to that television, and I know hockey fans, you're going to be seeing this from the Eastern Conference because there's 4 or 5 teams that are solid up out there, but it's going to be a fun and wild ride for the Stanley Cup playoffs. So discussing that, and of course, there were a few moves that the Penguins ended up making, and so joining us live via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard, Hunter Hodies. So, I mean, deadline day was kind of but the last couple of days, I mean, watching this and evaluating it, how did you kind of see this play out? Because I thought it was insane before the deadline day really came up around the corner. So a lot of names were on the move, and there's a bunch of teams now that are really geared up for the long run come April and May.
Yeah, it was crazy this week. And I don't really think I've ever seen a deadline where, all the big fish are just gone by Thursday, Friday. I mean, from a Penguins perspective, they cleared out a ton of money earlier this week. And I knew they were going after somebody. You don't just clear over $6 million in salary cap space. You just sit on your hands with about 48 hours to go until the deadline. And, they made their big move for Mikael Granlund. Look, I don't hate the player. I think he's actually very good. I just think he's also the antithesis of what this team really needs is that they need finishers in their bottom 6. He's not one of those, at least not right now. He had 64 points last season, but I'll also caution people that he played with A, Matt Duchene, B, Philip Forsberg, and C, Roman Josi, who is one of the 3 to 5 best defensemen on the planet. So you're coming to a new team, playing with, Jeff Carter, Danton Heinen. Maybe he'll swap with Nick Bonino or something since he's now a member of the Penguins. I just wish that Ron Hextall went out and used that salary cap space to just kind of a greater good because you were able to clear out all that money. 2 of your most recent signings, which were mistakes, and I'm glad that he recognized them. But I just don't think they were able to go out and just truly get a big difference maker that I think this team needs for down the stretch. And the funny thing is, everyone wants this guy gone. I think the fan base, a lot of the other media members that cover the team, but they've won 4 in a row, which is just typical of the stuff when it comes to the Penguins. But yeah, I mean, that was crazy. They made a couple other moves yesterday, of course, getting old friend Nick Bonino back and sending Brock McGinn out to get Kulikov for more defensive depth. But earlier in the week, man, it was crazy with all those rumors flying around. They're thinking about getting JT Miller, that contract is very long, a lot of money, and for someone who is, I think, just a power play specialist at this point in his career. But, this is probably one of the more wilder deadlines than I could, just think of, really.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. And especially, too, these are moves none of us were even used to seeing. I mean, the fact that Patrick Kane's going to the Big Apple and then Vladimir Tarasenko, I mean, I looked at that Rangers roster and it's just stacked and loaded. Like, this is cup now or nothing. And you look at Boston, and here's where I'll kind of align this because knowing Ron Hextall, I mean, he's real smart. He's done a lot of his research on players, and sometimes you come across, you make some victories or you got some whiffs, but in the end, you recognize that you move on from it. But Boston made the move where they extended David Pastrnak for 8 years. Now we know their three. They had him, Patrice Bergeron, and Brad Marchand. Now, what I think Boston's doing, they bring in Tyler Bertuzzi, they bring in Dmitry Orlov, and I feel like this is going to be a reload for what's to come in the future because I think this is Patrice Bergeron's last hurrah, and we don't know what the market's going to be for Brad Marchand. Now, experiences seeing from the Penguins' view because they have their three: Sidney Crosby, Geno Malkin, and Chris Letang. What was the thought process? Because when I saw the extensions for both Geno and for Chris Letang, what was the thought process that went through for Ron Hextall moving forward, and then what the Penguins should be preparing for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, when you make those kind of moves, you signal to everyone like, "Oh, you're all in." You don't really care about the short term future because the team is going to be bad in the years to come. Like that's just how it's going to be. I mean, we saw it happen with the Red Wings. You're seeing it happen now with the Chicago Blackhawks. It's going to happen with the Washington Capitals with Alex Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom call it their careers. But when you decide to bring those guys back, you are signaling to everyone that you are still in it to win it now, this year, and the following year. And, I think that's why some people got a little frustrated at this deadline because, the GM, he's patient, sure, but it's also like you're holding on to these first round picks like they're magic beans. Like you think you're going to get the next Austin Matthews with one of these mid-round picks. In all honesty, it's not even really a 50-50 with one of those late first round pick. It's kind of like 60-40 that he doesn't even make it to the NHL. And the odds decrease as you go further into the NHL draft. It's just such a different draft compared to the other sports. So, when I see some of these players going for not that high prices, I'm like, why aren't you doing this and giving the core the best chance that, they should have? Because they've been awesome this year. If I would have told you that Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, knock on wood, have not missed a game yet this season, and this is where they would be, I think most people would probably be surprised because, they've been awesome. But usually you have to deal with one or both of them missing 5 to 10 games a year. Gino's been a little injury prone throughout his career, but so far this season, he has not missed a game, which is crazy. So I just don't think, the GM did enough to help because the core is aging and they're still playing at an insanely high level. Sidney Crosby's on pace for 100 points this season. He's 35 years old. Evgeny Malkin, he's on pace for 80 to 85 points. He's 36 years old. I feel like they just didn't do enough to reward the players. And that's just what's really unfortunate because, everything should be on the line at these deadlines. Your first round picks, your second round picks, a lot of your top prospects. I know the Penguins don't have that, but you see where I'm getting at with that because, they were in on the Jacob Chikrin rumors. You saw what he went for, a first in 2 seconds. I'm sorry, I pay that price any day of the week if I'm getting a bona fide top pairing to second pairing defenseman. So, I'm glad that they obviously brought the core back, but when you do that, you don't have time to just sit around and be patient and all that stuff. You have to, make a commitment to winning. You can't just have that middle ground where you're like, oh, I'm going to value these picks as well. You saw what Tampa Bay is doing, Boston, everyone in the East really is just saying, the heck with draft picks this year.
Yeah, and it is insane because and here's what's funny too, and I thought about this yesterday is because because I know this watching, the Vegas Golden Knights here in my hometown, and the problem that I've always had with this team is because I don't know what their identity is. Like I could look at them left and right. Now they did get at least a couple of moves. Ivan Barbashev, they went and got Jonathan Quick, and they got a few others. But still, it's like they're so infamous for trading a lot of their draft picks. And I'm like, well, look at Seattle. They hit with Matt Beniers. Then you look at New Jersey, they hit with Jack Hughes, which a lot of people were kind of like, is he really a hyper score? I bought my stock on him because I knew at some point the Devils were going to get to this point. Now they've loaded and they've looked like, hey, we could be competitive for the next 5 years if we do this. So it just kind of seems like in hockey, there are certain draft picks, and we know everybody, at least for right now, like San Jose's in the driver's seat to where they want to get Connor Bedard, and there's a few of them that are good names. So somewhere in there, when you get a really good future superstar, I mean, that's kind of where draft picks really do kind of come into play, right?
Yeah, and especially, towards like the top half of the draft. If the Penguins were, even more down in the standings, I probably would not want to move for first round pick because you can actually get a true difference maker up there. But once you're down in those late teens, the 20s, heck, you're closer to the 30s, it just the odds of getting like a true impact player, they go down. Great credit to New Jersey. They won quite a few draft lotteries there, like the Penguins did, obviously, all those years ago. The Oilers are the same kind of team. The Sabres won a draft lottery, but I know Jack Eichel's not there anymore. But that's where I think the true value is with those first round picks. That's that top 5, top 10, because you're right. Seattle did a good job of getting Matty Beniers. They've done a good, solid job building around him. Their forward group is not bad. Defensively, they're okay. They've been well coached this season. That's been an interesting team to watch because I didn't think they were going to be that good this year. New Jersey, again, they benefit from hitting a couple draft lotteries, but outside of that, they've been able to build a pretty good competitive team around Hughes. He's sure they just got Timo Meyer. Jesper Bratt is there. He's really developed. Sharon Govich, I don't think was that high of a pick. He's done really well for them. They signed Dougie Hamilton. So it's moves also outside of that I think are really just showing that, the first round picks are good, those higher first round picks. But, if you don't build around them, I don't think you're probably going to get anywhere.
Yeah, no, of course. And that's where, a lot of teams like, and I even say this, I mean, Colorado, they were at a point where they hit with Nathan McKinnon. They hit with Mikko Rantanen, and they're obviously loving the superstar impact of Cale Makar. So this is a lot of it's a lot of smart movement, but it's also thinking about your future farm system as well. And some teams, they're on board with it. They know how this works. And some of them might have to get re-educated on a little of this stuff. But, retracting and talking about, identities, because I could tell you right now, I can tell a lot of teams off the top of my head. Like I look at, first of all, Colorado, hyper aggressive, speedy, very great on offense. That's their identity. The Dallas Stars this year, and I saw this from a mile away, defensive, in your face. They're willing to play hard on you, and that's their identity, and they've looked great doing it. And they add, another real key piece to their core, and then you look at the Rangers, hyper aggressive, speedsters, and they really do like to go for offense. So it's like when we get into March and when we get into April, identity is everything in this league. Are there some that are there some teams off the top of your head that have set their identity? They've set the tone. And there's some that maybe I'd be kind of not panicky, but I'd be a little bit concerned if I'm going into the playoffs.
Yeah. So, right off the top of my head, Boston, what you're going to get out of them. They're fast, they're skilled, but they can also play a heavy game. They have a lot of players out there that can throw their body around. They're honestly the perfectly built team for this season. They haven't been to a final in a few years. They haven't won a cup since they beat Vancouver all those years ago, but this is their best shot at it. And they have a beautifully built roster. Bergeron's last hurrah. I'm really curious to see how they do. Carolina, they used to be called the Carolina Corsies. Shot attempts, shots. They will throw everything at you, and they don't care. They just don't care about it. And, they also defend well. Jacob Slavin's probably one of the best defensemen, if not the best defensive defenseman in the league. They're fast, they're skilled, they're deep, they have good goaltending. They have an identity, and they stick.
And I gotta say, their puck distribution is ridiculous. Like it's just like it's almost like you're going along with like it's like a musical, it's just you got it in perfect harmony. And every time I watch the passes, it's insane.
They're crazy, and they'll fire 45, 50 shots a game. That's how Rod Brindamore wants them to play. You're right with the Rangers, all offense all the time, but they really can't defend outside of maybe Fox and Lindgren and Miller. They're probably going to have to rely on Fox to play half the games if they want to go on a run. And they've been doing this for about 15 years now. If our goalie is not the best on the planet, we're probably not going to win. They did it under Henrik Lundqvist, Igor Shesterkin. He was electric last year. He's going to have to be that this year if they want to go on a deep run. The West, Peter DeBoer, he's done great with the Stars. And this is how he starts off all of his tenures too. They do great in the first couple of years. Then it goes downhill. You're seeing that right now with the Stars. They have a great chance. They have a great core. Ben and Sagan are still kicking. Heiskanen's awesome. They have the goalie. We all saw what he did against the Flames last year, despite the loss. They have a true identity. You already touched on Colorado. Vegas is stingy defensively. They also have a lot of skill. If they can get Mark Stone back, they're going to be a really tough out once the playoffs start. But teams I guess I'm a little concerned about. It's a really good question. I don't really know what fully Seattle's identity is. They have some skill. They're decently deep, but what's the play style? Is that play style going to work? Where they kind of combine a little bit of speed and skill with a little bit of heavy hitting. I don't know if that's fully going to work against a team like LA or Vegas in the playoffs. Obviously, from a Penguins perspective, they want to be speed and skill, but I don't think they can do that truly anymore just because they have one of the older rosters. I've seen a lot of younger teams skate circles around them this year, which has been concerning. But, the league is trending younger. It's trending faster. If you're not at that point right now, you're probably going to be left behind. But, you're also seeing the Bruins, who they can throw their bodies around. There's always been different ways to win the Stanley Cup, even in recent years when you saw the Blues have a heavy hitting game that leads them to the Cup. But in terms of right now, I think the team that wins, it's going to be a one that speed, scale, can dish the body around. That's how I see it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree because you obviously have to be, A+ when it comes to, the physicality, not to mention too, I mean, you have to be smart with passes because I think that's the big thing. You can't, like, even when I look at the NBA playoffs, first of all, shots in the playoffs means everything. And you have to be the one to either you're shooting within the perimeter or you're getting, a guy who's got the hot hand, who's on the wing and he's giving you the 3 points. And guys that are willing to defend, the guys that are willing to give you the rebounds. So even when I look at, in hockey, I'm like, you got to have guys that are willing to defend. You have to communicate with your goaltender because that is that's your piece right there that starts it all. And then the offense, they go on a run, they control the puck, they control which spots they really want to shoot at because I'll go on forever about every time that Vegas drives me nuts when they get so cute, when they crash into the net and they don't just bury it. I'm always like, you have to take a chance. You have to be able to do that because teams are going to use that against you if you're not that aggressive. So, and I wanted your take on this, years ago. So, first of all, in 2017, this is when the mark that, the Golden Knights officially became a franchise. And so, Marc-Andre Fleury left a lot of great memories in Pittsburgh. We know this was hard for Penguins fans because the fact of you had an elite goaltender who gave you a lot. I mean, the fact of winning multiple Stanley Cups and then moving forward, had Matt Murray. Then you're dealing with Tristan Jarry. When you look at the goaltending situation for Pittsburgh, because it was quite the change, how do you really evaluate this position moving forward? And is there something that the Penguins might have a thought on the back of their head in the next couple of years that they do want to get, they do want to set themselves straight at that position?
Sorry about that. I had to mute my mic because my dogs are going crazy at something downstairs. I don't really know what it is. But no, it's a very good question. Tristan Jarry this season, he's been in and out of the lineup, very banged up. It's kind of started almost this time last year, Jake, to be honest. He had that broken foot, had to miss almost the entire series. It was one of the reasons why, if he's healthy in that series against the Rangers, I think they win that in 5 or 6 games with the way they were playing. But this year, he's started out the season hot, got hurt, came back, got hurt again. He's finding his groove. They just need to make sure that he is the guy. A lot of the goalie free agents this offseason are really bad. He's probably one of, if not the best one out there with Frederick Anderson, a couple others. But if they can rely on him here down the stretch to get them some wins and get them into the playoffs and maybe even win around, I think he is going to get extended at 5-6 years, $5 to $6 million per, something like that. They've relied on 2 goalies before to have them win in the playoffs. I don't think that's going to be the case if they want to win this year because Casey DeSmith is very inconsistent. That's honestly been one of the biggest problems I've had with this front office is that this is the 3rd year in a row that they've trotted out the same tandem. And both of the previous years, one or both have been hurt. And I'm just surprised. It's like, oh, you're still doing that here. Yeah, it kind of boggles my mind a little bit. So they're taking a huge risk. Jari is playing. His conditioning's back. He's making the saves that he's supposed to make. He's bailing them out on occasions. He has to stay healthy down the stretch here if he especially wants to come back next year. He's probably the most important free agent going into this offseason. Gone are the days, as you said, where Marc-Andre Fleury is there for 10 plus years. Matt Murray was doing his thing before he fell off a little bit, but glad to see he's doing well in Toronto. But, they need to have him, Jari, be the long-term answer here. So you're not just going in and out of, trying to find a franchise goalie. Because, those are hard to find. The Rangers got lucky with a Favre to Rodgers thing, with Lundqvist to Shesterkin. The Stars have their guy. I can come up with probably a few other, the Lightning obviously have their guy in Vasilevsky. I'm not saying the Penguins have to have that good of goaltending. I've been saying forever that if they have average goaltending, they should be able to win, but they need to show that, or Jari needs to show that he is the guy, not just this season, but in years to come, especially if he wants a big payday this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I evaluate goaltenders much like I evaluate quarterbacks, because if you don't have that quarterback that really is the playmaker and he's the voice that this team has to really get behind on, and somebody they rely on this, it does make it harder. And when I looked at the Penguins for years, yeah, it was tough kind of moving past with Fleury and knowing, Murray, as solid as he is, there were times where there was a little bit of inconsistency. There was some times where it was like, you really have to be that wall behind net and not allow these goals to get past. Now, there may be a few guys in mind. I think about it with, first of all, the Flyers are just a dumpster fire right now. There's not much I could say, but I feel for Carter Hart, though, because I feel like there is something there. But if you're in a team that is just, it's a mess, then mostly you're going to play like that. And I feel like even if, hypothetically, you put him on a Penguins roster where it's experience, it's guys that are, they communicate, they talk well, I think you'd thrive in that. So even if you kind of have to find some way to finagle some sort of moves where you could get a solid one to where Tristan Jarry doesn't have to feel like he's overly reliant. I watched that with Jacob Markstrom multiple times in Vancouver, and it was like they didn't have the long-term solution, and now he's looking better in his position. So, one thing before, we wrap it up is, over the years watching hockey, we've watched great players, Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, and several others down the stretch. I remember watching so much of Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, and now we're literally looking at Connor McDavid just be this absolute animal, and just the look of what NHL really looks like now. So I know Ovechkin, I've got my money on it. I think he's honestly going to pass the great Wayne Gretzky's record because of just how consistent he's been with that rocket shot and just his consistency. When I look at Sidney Crosby, I look at the captain, I look at the leadership, I look at how he really, builds a lot of these guys around him. Even when I watch them, they bring in Jason Zucker, they bring in a lot of these other offensive guys. How did you like watching this team for years and years and years? What's like the greatest thing you can say about Sidney Crosby? Because at some point, we know Ovechkin's going to be out the door, and at some point, Crosby's going to be in the same boat. How did you really like great fond memories you have of Sidney Crosby in that Penguins uniform?
Yeah, he's just the ultimate captain. Really, he's just a great person on the ice, but he's also an even greater person off the ice. Everyone likes to, it's not the same anymore where people used to hate on him for stuff, but he really is just an incredible person, the way he goes out of his way to, help people and, just stop by and just do the smallest of things. I think really is one of the main things I'm going to remember him for on the ice. Just the work ethic, how superstitious he is. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But, just watching him has just been nothing short of a delight. I think of the Jason Spezza play from 2010 where he just went behind the net against the Senators and just dished back and forth before getting the thing. Yeah. I remember that like it was yesterday. The comeback that he had after the concussion, the arena was buzzing like I don't think it's ever buzzed before because he knows if he was ever going to play again. Who knew if he was ever going to raise the Stanley Cup again after '09? And they go on that massive run in 2016 because that team was just inevitable after Mike Sullivan took over. I knew there was a game, I think, in March. Apologize for my lab down there. I think he wants my German Shepherd to play. I remember there was a game in March, and they beat the Red Wings so bad. It was mid-March, and I'm like, okay, this team is on another level. And the way they just destroyed everyone in that run outside of Tampa Bay was just a sight to behold. So, I remember him for just all of that, living up to the hype. I think that's the biggest thing. Some of these players, they don't live up to the hype, right? He has more than did that. He's going to retire as a top 5 player to ever play the game, I think. And hopefully he has many more accomplishments to go for the rest of his career. But, seeing him do all those behind the backdoor passes, deep defenders like it's nothing. His defensive work's gotten so much better. He is just so awesome. And I can't, he's one of the main reasons I've gotten really into this sport, but I'm so thankful for it, really.
Yeah, and in a prestigious franchise like Pittsburgh, I mean, they came off of, a tenure and a time where they had Mario Lemieux. I mean, watching him and how great that he was, and then passing the torch down to Sidney Crosby to lead the charge in, Steel City hockey. I mean, it's really what has been a grandstand. And the funny thing is, you look at, the time when Gretzky and Lemieux were both playing at the time, they were both electric. They were both, redefined players. And I look at the same way when it comes to Crosby and Ovechkin. And I know the heartbreaker, but the fact that, first of all, Washington fans had so many fits from Pittsburgh that, they could not get over the hump. And then the year the Capitals go win the Cup, the demons were exercised. They finally got past it. But I felt like it was a mutual respect for both those captains because they both do so much for their organizations. And I think by the time their tenure's done in the NHL, I mean, they both were great draft picks when we first saw them. And then, they both win their cups for their respective franchises. So seeing Crosby, in that point, we're winning not just 1, but 3 in that franchise and different movements. There were different shakeups, but they still managed to stay either middle of the pack or they were still the top tier team in the Eastern Conference that you try to brush them away. They're not going to do that. They're going to be that solid, and they're going to continue to go on these runs. But great career, great guy, and I love it for the fact that he's got a personality and he just gels well with everybody in Pittsburgh. But Hunter, I appreciate your time here. Where can people find you to talking more of Steel City hockey?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodies. The show's Twitter is at @LO_Penguins, and you can follow that wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, ad-free on Amazon Music now. You can also find my written work at The Spun, where I work full-time, which is part of Sports Illustrated. So yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, and we'll definitely have to do this again sometime.
Oh, I'd absolutely love it. Race to the playoffs is always my favorite time of year. I look at it. This is birthday month for me. So I'm like, I get March Madness, I get, race to the playoffs. So I'm getting everything that I'm wanting here this year. But I appreciate your time. Good luck with the Penguins, and we'll see what the Stanley Cup playoffs are going to be in store for us this year. Take care.
Yep. Take care. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hunter Hodies, really, really good guy. Great having him on. It is a great thing because, you look at it as far as, what exactly that this looks like for the Penguins. They've been a middle of the pack team, and they've also been that team that they've geared themselves toward, being that, being that explosive team. But we know the goaltending, it took a lot of changes because of the fact of, I love seeing the Flyers fail. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely touch upon that because I'm like, I first of all, I looked at everybody's salary caps before the deadline day itself. God, it's insane. It's insane with a lot of these salary caps because it's like, first of all, Major League Baseball is so spoiled that they get a lot. San Diego, they're getting a whole arsenal of players, and then Yankees spend their money on whoever, and it's just like, it's insane. So, you look at hockey, and there's only certain teams. Like, first of all, the Ducks are reloading. They're rebuilding. They got Trevor Zegras, who I think is really, really good. They're at some point gonna have to be real and honest and really be um I think they're gonna have to come to that decision with John Gibson. They're gonna have to. And I mean, you think about, Ryan Getzlav, and so, this team, Anaheim, they were on a run and then they just fell short. Then they decide, hey, we're going to be in rebuild mode, but we're going to get some draft picks. We're going to get some really good players in the middle of it. I mean, we're seeing Chicago unload on players. They didn't get rid of Jonathan Taves because of injury reasons, but at some point, we don't know how long Seth Jones will really be there in Chicago. But so they have to reload on younger players. Well, Patrick Kane, man. I mean, it is, yeah, it's a clean house for Philadelphia. And that's why I said Carter Hart, I feel bad for him because he's a really, really good piece as a goaltender that they can build around. And it does make all the difference in the world. So, Oreo man, you're gonna have to message me here, and we'll see. We'll see what we can do from there. But I really wanted to get into this. So, shifting on toward the NFL. So, the price has definitely been leaked out by the New York Giants. The Giants are willing to give quarterback Daniel Jones between 35 to 38 million a year in the contract. That's exactly what I would have paid him. But I guarantee you, Daniel Jones, he's probably going to say no. A lot of his agents and everybody that want the most money made out of it. To me, I think it's kind of, outright ridiculous because I don't think Daniel Jones is worth more than 45 million. Did you watch Dak Prescott? Did you watch a lot of those quarterbacks? If you are not making the throw, that is where it gets harder in this organization. And we know it's New York. We know it's Big Apple money. We know it's a lot of, those things where you're watching this organization. And first of all, as I pointed out before, one winning season in 10 years before Brian Dable showed up. And you can't argue with it. And you went through the years with Ben McAdoo and Pat Shurmur and Joe Judge. All three of them were absolute failures. Brian Dable is smart and he understands offense. And he's built a lot of rapport when it comes to great quarterbacks, when it comes to quarterback play. And he's been superb and solid behind it. So that's the price tag I would have given Daniel Jones myself, 35 to 38 million a year. Because first of all, that's ensuring I can bring back Saquon Barkley. That's ensuring I've got enough wiggle room to maybe get some more offensive receivers. Because you got, a market where some receivers, they're going to be traded. Or they're going to be receivers that are going to be signed out of free agency. So, and you've got the draft. So, to me, I look at the Giants situation. I know their defense, there's a couple pieces that I think should be some needs, whether it's going to be in the draft or whether it's going to be in free agency, but they looked real solid. They might need a little bit more help. But as far as I look at it, Kenny Golladay, they released him. They got rid of that dead money, and they go and spend it on a wide receiver that's going to be consistent, that's going to be healthy, and somebody that's not going to be served as a liability. Because the Giants, they've had several really good receivers over the years. Victor Cruz, Odell Beckham. They had Mario Manningham at times. So, it's possible for this Giants team. Now we know, that's great. They beat Minnesota. Minnesota is just falling apart with this Kirk Cousins thing, which I honestly feel like, and I talked to Rap about it for Purple Pocket Podcast, and he agrees. Kirk Cousins is only going to give you as much as Kirk Cousins will show for. That's really all it is. And they're going to really think heavily on the quarterback position, whether they do go with Anthony Richardson or they get lucky enough and they go and get Will Levis. But as far as I see it with the Giants, I mean, you're in a competitive NFC East where the Eagles have a lot to show for. And I know that there's going to be some hard decisions with players in the free agent market. But between them and the Cowboys, because the Cowboys are going to franchise tag Tony Pollard, they're going to lose Dalton Schultz. I think he's going to end up elsewhere. And then I don't think they're going to they're going to have a deal in place now for their linebacker, Leighton Vander Esch. So they might have to address that in the draft. So there's so much evaluations on this, but as far as I see it with the Giants, I'm not paying Daniel Jones over $45 million a year. I'm not going to do it. I've watched Dak Prescott. I've watched several quarterbacks who have honestly have gone through this role. And surprisingly enough, I'm glad that Jared Goff isn't really worth that much, because even though I like Jared Goff, and Detroit is building themselves a really young, explosive team, very emotionally invested when you got a guy like Dan Campbell. But Jared Goff, I don't view him as Patrick Mahomes. If this is why I said, if your name is not Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert or Jalen Hurts, possibly even Lamar Jackson and Trevor Lawrence, I'm not paying you that. I'm not paying you the big bucks this way. So there's tough decisions that have to be made, but I think it's clear with the Giants, this is why you really, really want to be smart about this contract. And even if Daniel Jones walks, then that just means, you could bring in a different quarterback at the end of it. You may end up bringing in a Derek Carr. You may bring in a Jimmy Garoppolo. You might bring in some type of bridge quarterback until you find that franchise quarterback. This happens all the time. In smart general managers, because we know Dave Gettleman has had several times, in his career where there have been questionable moves in New York. But I think if you're going to be smart and do the right thing, I wouldn't pay Daniel Jones that much. And I wouldn't budge on the asking offer. That's honestly, I'm not going to break that threshold. I've watched too many quarterbacks who have played on that salary, and they've become liabilities. Cowboys, they have to be honest with themselves. Dak Prescott is not everything you make it out to be. Yes, he's accurate, but does he throw the long ball? That's why Kellen Moore is in LA with the Chargers. He's going to get more out of Justin Herbert than he would of Dak Prescott, because he's capable of throwing the long ball. He's capable of being hyper accurate. So, and he's available. He's available majority of the times. We know what the adversities that Justin Herbert goes through, but we know the Chargers have a huge decision to make when it comes to the salary. So, again, I'm not budging on that. I'm not budging on that asking price. I thought that was absolutely the right thing to do. So, all right, we're going to be taking a break here. Coming up next, we're going to be talking a little bit more on, the NHL playoffs. We're really going to get geared up for it. Stacey Gotsulias is going to be joining me with Locked On Yankees here in about 10 minutes. We appreciate everybody who has joined in and is continuing to join in, like, follow, and subscribe, and even share this out to your friends, family, coworkers, and so much more. Get him up in here into the live, and we appreciate them sitting back, relaxing, and enjoying the show. So appreciate all of you guys. So if you haven't heard of it already, we have exciting news that's going to be coming out next week. I don't want to just blurt it out, but I do have real good, exciting announcements, of course, and as usual, with the sponsorship of SeatGeek. SeatGeek is now a proud sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show, with hundreds of different events going on, live concerts, sporting events, stand-up shows, and so much more that you don't want to lose out on your seat. Listen, inflation's ridiculous. Seat tickets are absolutely expensive, and it's just absurd. I can't even go to a Golden Knights game without having to pay $300 on a ticket, and that doesn't even include food, drinks, so much more. But with SeatGeek, you'll get the best discounted prices in finding your seat to your next event. And when you do, before hitting checkout, use this promo code, Snake Sports. That's Snake Sports promo code on SeatGeek.com. You don't want to miss out on it. Go online, SeatGeek.com, find your seat, don't lose your seat, and get it at the best affordable price with promo code Snake Sports. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show, with hundreds of events listed, live concerts, sporting events, and so much more. Go on to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code Snake Sports Talk Show, and save yourself $20 off your first purchase.
Never stop, I'll get it if I want it. Gotta make to myself a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top.
Yo, no, I ain't the type to give up. If I do something, man, I do it till I get what I want. I turn a business out of nothing into something I love. I got a poker face, but honestly, I'm not one to bluff. I flip a switch, never miss, man, I always stay up. Don't let them see you, bitch, always have a plan to stay tough. This life ahead of you ain't easy, it was built to be rough. But that's what makes a personality, is tragedy, bruh. So keep your head on your shoulders. Now we ain't out here moving rocks, we out here moving.
All right, folks. Well, as we said before, SeatGeek.com, promo code SNAKESports. That's where you don't want to end up missing out on your next event. With SeatGeek, you know prices have been ridiculous nowadays, but they've got you covered with great discounted tickets. And, of course, before you check out, use promo code SNAKESports for $20 off of your first purchase. Well, we all know that, deadline day yesterday was pretty interesting, but a lot of the big fish names that we saw all throughout it through the last couple of days, it's been fun. It's been really, really entertaining just kind of seeing all these moves being happening. But we're going to be shifting towards Major League Baseball. So we know, spring training's been really, really good. By the way, big league weekend out here in Las Vegas where we have the A's and we have the Reds, and then come the 18th and 19th, Rockies and the Royals will be out here. So joining me live via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard, talking about those New York Yankees. So I wanted a little of your take on this. I don't know if you've seen it, but I said this early on the show. So, I like Stephen A, and I do think he's very professional in some of his works, but I thought he was a little in the wrong on this. And so were a couple of people in ESPN. They mentioned about, New York teams. That's all franchises, of which ones would win their championship first. Michael Kay, who has been a really good voice as a broadcaster for the Yankees for years, mentioned the Rangers. And every one of them wanted to put hockey in the back burner. And I was like, whoa, time out. First of all, New York sports, I've been to New York 6 times in my life. I've seen how this, the media, the franchises, first of all, Yankees have not won since 2009. Yes, they have been in the playoffs, but there's been inconsistencies. If they're hit with the injury bug or the offense is not getting going where it's supposed to, then that's where they fall short. The Mets were inconsistent. They made it to the World Series in 15, but didn't really win up to their expectation. And then they won 100 games last year, and they lost in the first round. So it's like, and then, the Giants, they had one winning season in 10 years before Brian Dable came on. So, I look at this and I'm like, this Rangers roster's stacked. So I'm like, there's a possibility that the Rangers would win their first championship. What was your thought on that comment? Because I'm like, let's not put hockey on the back burner. That's just a little disrespectful.
Yeah, it's kind of strange how they do that in New York. Even though, when the Rangers and the Knicks both made the finals in 94, I mean, this place went crazy for it because they were playing at the same exact time. And the Rangers winning was such a big deal because they hadn't won in 54 years. And yeah, for some reason, people still dismiss hockey. And then they also revere the New York teams as if they win championships all the time. And it's embarrassing as a level-headed New York fan who realizes that's not how it is anymore or how it really ever was, because the only team who consistently won championships was the Yankees, and they haven't done that in a while. Right. And it's just funny to me that New York fans are so dismissive of hockey, but then they get into it once the playoffs start. So it's just weird. I don't understand.
And I looked at it. I'm like, look, y'all are lucky Mark Messier wasn't sitting in that desk, because then he would have really, really ripped a new one to every one of them. And it's like, come on now. Am I not the one who led the team to winning the Stanley Cup? And then it was just nothing. I mean, I just look at it like, do you know what kind of injuries hockey players go through? I mean, good God, in the 80s, we just saw somebody get their neck sliced, and yet they still were willing to play in the third period. Like, that's not a big deal. Like, and then they look at, this rubbery puck. Yeah, take a puck at 110 miles an hour.
Like that poor girl in Columbus who got killed.
Right. Yeah. And then come back to me with a sure shot answer. Like, come on. But, and it is interesting because New York media, we know it's dog eat dog town. We know that there's so much that goes on in New York media, but looking at the Yankees and recapping last year. So Aaron Judge, we know, is this big thing that New York has been looking for years and years. I've been in the part where they've had a great championship run. I mean, Curtis Granderson, Nick Swisher, all these big time names, and even the great Derek Jeter. So Aaron Judge wins, the MVP, and he breaks the all-time Yankee record. So looking at that, and the contract spoke for itself. Are there some concerns that draw you right now on this contract? Because to me, well, I know baseball, we're pretty spoiled in the no salary cap thing, but I still feel like if you're going to get a bunch of really consistent numbers with Aaron Judge, this is where, if you're the Yankees, you got to get over this hump.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, I think with most long-term contracts, the teams aren't really looking at the back end. They're looking at the first few years because they know that the last 4 years of a 9-year deal, 10-year deal, 11-year deal. Xander Bogaerts, did he sign a 12-year deal? Like, the people who make the contracts know that the I don't want to be fresh here, but the ass end of the contract isn't going to mean anything, and it's really the front. Um, they did what they had to do, but here's my thing. The day of the arson Judge tweet from John Heyman, for those 7 minutes, I was completely panicked. And I already have anxiety, and that just ramped it up to an all-time high level.
Yeah.
But before I went to sleep that night, a wave of calm came over me because I thought to myself, and I became an obnoxious New Yorker in this moment, but I said to myself, why on earth would he leave this? He's
Right.
the guy. He is the guy. He has his own chambers in right field that people sit in with robes. And he could be the Derek Jeter of this generation, even if he can lead them to one championship at this point, because he's just so, it's not just the hitting. It's the defense. He did a perfectly fine job playing center field too when they needed him to last year, which is why he didn't win a Gold Glove, because he split time between the two positions. He also stole 16 bases. Like, he's just the guy. So why would he have even left? He's definitely just so much fun to watch. But yeah, don't worry about him after like 36.
That's what, yeah.
Good years there, and then the last 4, he'll be DHing all the time, because we don't know how a 6'7", 282 guy who plays all the time and plays in the field all the time and has stayed relatively healthy the last few seasons, because a few of his injuries were fluky. We'll see how his body reacts. We don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron Judge, I could already tell when we're moving into a generation of baseball to where I love the personality part of him, because that it does speak New York to me. And I've been, the first ever game I've been to with Major League Baseball, I was 6 years old. I was at old school Yankee Stadium, and I was there when Jim Abbott was pitching and they were playing the A's. And it was fun, and you had a lot of great names. You had Tino Martinez, you had Paul O'Neill, you had Scotty Brocious, and that great 2001 roster that unfortunately, they fell short, but it was probably one of the greatest World Series we'd ever watched, even in our time, because so much was happening. But, I looked through that years and years beyond, and I think he definitely is the one that leads that charge, because you're not going to see this with Stanton.
No.
They pick up this contract, and he's a power hitter, but now you got 2 great power hitters. But, looking at this roster and looking at the lineup, because I do like Gleyber Torres, and I do like a couple guys, even Hishioka, and I really love the DJ LeMahieu thing, because you got to have somebody that's willing to spray the ball in the right field. So, when I look at this roster, I think one of the problems from last year is because, yes, they rely so heavily on the power, but yet we got to stick to the old school, get on base, score me runs, give me something that could at the very least get us past this, because, they win that first round and then they face Houston, which has clearly been one of their nemesises since the time of 2017.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate this roster? Because when I look at some of these, I'm looking for the best, to where it's a mixture of a lot of things. They do well contact hitting. They do well situational play. How did you evaluate this roster going into the 2023 season?
Well, I feel like DJ LeMahieu is a big wild card there, because he played in 125 games last year, but he wasn't healthy most of the year. And you could tell he wasn't right, because he just looked bad. If he's healthy and he's hitting the way he normally does, we don't need him to be the DJ LeMahieu of 2019 with the juiced balls, hitting 20-something home runs for the first time in his career. We just need him to be the guy that comes up, and if someone's on second or third, they're almost automatically driven in by him. I mean, he was insane that year. If we can get that DJ LeMahieu back, and then have Stanton stay healthy, Rizzo stay relatively healthy, because, Stanton and Rizzo, even though they were injured toward the end of the year and were spotty with their play. Rizzo had 32 home runs. Stanton had 31 home runs. And yes, it's a lot of home run or nothing with those guys. But if they can get LeMahieu going, if Glaber can get going, he had a rebound year last year because he had 2 rough seasons, 2020 and 2021, after a really good 2019. And if he can get more consistent as well. But I agree with you with the not relying on the power thing. I'm hoping the shift rule helps some of these guys, but I know that the Red Sox pulled something on Joey Gallo where they had the outfielder move over because you can do that. You have to keep the infielders on either side of second, but the outfield, you can do whatever the hell you want. So there might be a way where teams are going to find a way to shift again on these guys and make it so they can't hit. But I don't know. I don't understand the whole not being able to hit the other way thing. Like, if you know they're going to shift on you all the time, why can't you figure this out in batting practice? You're a professional baseball player, for the love of God.
But you know what it is, and I've said this several times. I even spoke to Lauren Willen, who covers the Red Sox, and it's funny, and I hated bringing up bad memories to her, but the time when Robinson Cano, when he got shifted, all he did was throw a bunt down third baseline, and he still got a double off it. Like, if we're and then Bryce Harper just recently did it, and it's like, are you finally figuring that out with the shift on how to beat them? Like, to be an all-time player, like I just look at it and I'm like, first of all, the getting rid of the shift was comical. Because I'm like, look, now you're making it easy for guys like Joey Gallo and a lot of them who are just straight pull hitters, which why isn't that, you have batting coaches for a reason. Why are they not implementing a lot of this, throw outside? Even if you got to give me a base hit, I don't care. Because, I played this game for years. And what I was always taught, and even playing, adult softball in a tournament, is if you're hitting that right side, right center field majority of the time, you are a tournament player. You are a guy that's consistent because you're scoring in runs. These are the statistics I care about: average and RBIs. Home runs, I don't care about, but if you do, that's fine. You're giving us more runs. But those two statistics is what really makes the player. That's why I love guys like, sometimes Nolan Arenado. I do love Paul Goldschmidt, which I'm glad he won MVP because he's been the most consistent ball player in this league. That's why I'm like, nobody gives him a lot of love and credit for what he does. So, when I watched that with, the rule changes, and really kind of touching upon that, because now we have, the pitch count rule. Just earlier, Max Scherzer got a little debacled because of the balk thing, because he tried to do a quick pitch on Victor Robles. How do you see these rule changes? And at what point do players at some point get comfortable with all these changes?
Yeah, I personally like the pitch clock just because it's making the games go faster and it's making guys kind of have to think on their feet, which is really funny because now they don't have 45 seconds to mull around the, mound. We saw Wandy Peralta do an entire strikeout in 20 seconds the other day because he just kept quick pitching the guy, and the guy was just like, so the pitchers might use that to their advantage because that might actually really make the batters uncomfortable that they're moving so quickly. Right. But I like the pace of play so far because, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I can't believe I'm watching a game for 3.5 hours. I'm an old time Sunday night baseball veteran because I had the Sunday plan at Yankee Stadium. I was stuck at games so late that I'd call up my boss on the way home and be like, I'm just letting you know I'm on my way home. If I'm late, this is why. Most of the time I wasn't. I would make it into work, but the pace of play doesn't bother me that much. It's more everyone else complaining about it. So I'm glad that the complaints are going to go down. I feel like the players, it's good that they're doing this in spring training. I think by the time spring training ends, most of them will know what they're doing. You might see some hiccups in the regular season, but I'd say by the All-Star break, you're not going to see any kind of violations because they're going to know what's going on with everything. And I think it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love the pitch count rule. I also do like, only in regular season play, the ghost runner rule, because of the fact of, first of all, these games have to be wrapped up. There's obviously got to be a winner, but at the same time, I love the fact that it improved to where it's a 2.5 hour game, because then it really does speed up the pace of play. Because first of all, you're not going to catch me at a 3+ hour game on a Tuesday night, knowing that I got to work at 3, wake up at 3:45 just to clock in at 5:30. Like, it's not going to happen with me. But, and I do like the adjustment changes. I still think, the shift rule is kind of comical to me because I'm like, then you're just not allowing the players to challenge themselves to hit to the other side. You're just making it an easy play for them. But everything else beyond that, like the ghost runner should only be used for the regular season. Postseason, like I look at this with the same with hockey because they do the 5-minute 3-on-3. If we can't get a winner, then they go into shootouts, and then that gets entertaining. So I like that portion. But when it comes to postseason, it's pressurizing. That's the way I want to keep it because that's what shows the boys from the men who the real champions are. So, evaluating this division because we know the Yankees, they've got a lot of competition on their hands. They know that they've got the Rays that never seem to go away with their pitching staff, which for whatever reason always seems to have been stellar and has been like that since 2008. And then, the young Blue Jays, which we know there's a mixture of veterans, mixture of youngsters that they're still kind of getting into their own. How do you kind of see this division and, the arms race behind it? Because I know Boston, they're kind of falling into this hole where, they got rid of a lot of great players, but they're not really kind of fulfilling some ends that they want to be in. And then we know the Orioles, they're even going to be competition with them too, with their youth movement.
Yeah. I don't want to make any predictions because last year we did our roundtable, the AL East hosts of Locked On, and except for Ulysses of Locked On Rays, who picked the Rays to win the division, most of us were picking the Blue Jays to win. But we thought that the Blue Jays, the Rays, and the Yankees were all going to be bunched up. We figured Boston would be in there somewhere, and then the Orioles would be in the basement. And then the division turned out to be completely different than anyone ever thought it would be. The Yankees got off to that insane start, and they had that cushion. So when they had the worst August they've had since I was in high school, they were able to recover from it in September and not lose the division. The Orioles came out of nowhere to surprise the hell out of the Red Sox, who thought, well, all right, maybe we'll be in third or fourth place. They finish in last place. And the Orioles are like, hey, we almost made a wild card spot. Hi. Yeah. So I really don't know how this division's going to play out. I think health plays a factor, definitely. The Rays lost Glasnow for at least 8 weeks with the oblique injury. So that's kind of a big blow, but they always recover from that stuff. The Rays are getting as annoying as the Astros to me now. As a Yankee fan, I have to say, I'm just like, could you guys go away? Could you become the Devil Rays again? I missed when you guys were the Devil Rays and the Yankees scored 13 runs in an inning on you twice in one season. Please.
Yeah, and even for their youth movement with Wander Franco and even Randy Arozarena, like, it's strange because, I mean, we moved past the year when they had Ben Zobrist, Evan Longoria, and a lot of really good names. But, the pitching staff never seems to change, even when they had James Shields and David Price and even Chris Archer for the time being. And then here you are with Tyler Glasnow and several other players. So
McClanahan, he's really good too.
McClanahan's really good. Oh, I loved his stuff. And so I look at the Yankees pitching staff and even with, Garrett Cole, because we know he's the one that's leading the charge. We know I've looked at the Yankees and I'm like, he cannot be Mr. Reliant all the time on that rotation because we know Frankie Montas has been shut down. And then, you're hoping Luis Severino really picks himself back up. So, this rotation and, I thought the bullpen actually showed some spurts. They got better. And, and so they're getting to that point where they're going to be a lockdown type of bullpen. But at some point, I mean, Brian Cashman really has to look at this rotation and he may have to add up a few pieces. Could that be something he might address, in the trade deadline?
I don't think so. I think the rotation is okay because you have Cole, you have Rodon, you have Cortez, Severino. I mean, if you want to split the lefties, then you put it in a different order. Yeah. And then in the fifth spot for now, Clark Schmidt and Domingo Germán are fighting for it. But you also have some pitchers from the minors, other pitchers from the minors that you could possibly have for the first couple of months of the season. And I think if Montas is not okay by the trade deadline, maybe pick someone up for him. But I feel like the rest of the rotation is okay because he's the fifth starter. If he was the ace of the staff and he got injured the way he was, I would think the Yankees would panic. But, they're 1, 2, 3/4. And I always say this, Luis Severino, if he's healthy, should be his full name. Yep. But this is his free agency year. This is like the big year that he needs to really step up. And
Yep.
I feel like this could be the year that we finally see him repeat his 2017, 2018 performance, and hopefully he stays healthy. And if he does, that's actually a scary rotation when you
Yeah.
look at it.
Yeah,
If
no,
everything goes well.
yeah, I agree. When everything goes well and they get healthy, because that I've seen it several times where that had always been that issue because of injury concerns. And
Mhm.
then, of course, when someone goes down, in goes the inconsistency. There's not a balance between all of that. And that's where I was like, okay, somebody has to, at the very least, because I do love Nestor Cortez and I think he's really built into his own. But I got to have guys that are going to be the next men up. And unfortunately with Frankie Montas, because I've seen a lot of his stuff in Oakland and seeing him, with the Yankees, he probably would be built in a better situation because guys in the rotation really are solid. But unfortunately, to not see his campaign this year takes a little bit of a dent. But hopefully, the Yankees can figure themselves out during the stretch. Because I always look at it by the time we get into August and we get into September, when October baseball comes around, you're hoping you keep the consistency of that rotation because that's the last thing that you would ever want to happen before playoffs start.
Right.
So, I've looked at this and I've looked at payrolls, and I know the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Braves, the Astros, and even the Cubs. A lot of these premier franchises we know have the most money in their cap. And I look at a lot of the bottom tiers where you think of the Reds, the A's, and several teams. Of course, a lot of news right now is the fact that the A's don't really have a plan in Oakland. And I've said this over and over again. I live in Vegas, and I'm like, you've got to move this team here because, first of all, it's a better money market. Not to mention, too, even if you're going to get a ball field going, my town, what we're based upon is football, baseball. Everybody wants to think differently. First of all, hockey was not a part of the plan, but yet Golden Knights happened and T-Mobile Arena, and it became a success.
Yeah.
In come the Raiders. We know Pro Bowl was a success. Now Super Bowl this year is here, and I've told people we're prepared, but I don't know if we're really that prepared for what's going to happen here. But with Major League Baseball, you're getting money. I mean, it's going to make Magic Johnson smile because he's close by to Vegas and he's watching these games here where the Dodgers are in town, and so looking and evaluating, payroll structures, because at some point, I mean, I've looked at this move and nothing against Oakland, but outside of Alameda, you really don't have anything. And you kind of want to look into a different money market.
Yeah. I feel like this whole big market, small market, we can't spend money because we're a small market thing is a bunch of BS because all these guys are billionaires. I mean, you're seeing it with the Padres. They're the 27th market in the country and they're spending all this money and they're kind of, shattering this myth that, we can't spend money. And they're just like, here, giving out extensions, giving out contracts.
I said this. What gave them the break was the fact that the Chargers moved out of San Diego. So now all that money is now being produced into the only team in San Diego.
Yeah.
And so it's like now they're able to spend money to go and re-sign Manny Machado, which honestly, good luck with that contract. But, Xander Bogaerts, and then at some point, Juan Soto. So San Diego's becoming now that money cesspool.
Yeah, but I kind of like it because it's making the other teams look silly when they complain that they can't spend. I mean, John Henry had the nerve to even complain about payroll, and it's like, you own Liverpool too. What are you doing? Like, you stop. You're not small market. Stop. I can't take it. And I love how they're all pissed at Steve Cohen for spending all the money he has. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You're supposed to spend money to help your team win. How much fun would it be if we saw competitive teams out of Pittsburgh and Cincinnati instead of having these poor fans be excited about baseball, but going in knowing that their teams have absolutely no shot of doing anything? I can't imagine being a fan of a team that goes into spring training knowing that unless all the teams above them completely collapse, there's absolutely no way, even with the extra teams in the playoffs, they have no chance of making it. It's so sad to me.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I think of teams that honestly, I think probably in the 10-year run, let's hypothetically speak, in the 10-year run, I feel like the teams that honestly could have a shot, especially in the position that they are in, if that was to happen, I feel like Milwaukee might shoot for it because of the fact of you got a partial ownership, even if, it's Aaron Rodgers, who's partial ownership of the Milwaukee Bucks, and then you got the Brewers. He's just green. He's Wisconsin everything, and then you have the Cleveland Guardians, which hard for me to to really get used to that, but Cleveland showed some spurts. I mean, we've all watched Major League, several times, and they
several try like 500.
Yeah, so they never cease to amaze me because they've got a lot of real good youngsters, and I feel like they've been to the World Series once, in recent years. So they could be a team that can shoot for it. You just never know. And that's what I love about baseball is there's always that state of the unknown. And then there's teams that get red hot we never even heard about. And then the other team that I think really could thrive on that, could send the narrative if they can is the Toronto Blue Jays. Because we know hockey's obviously Canadian. We know this, but we've had teams where in the States, they've won championships more than what Canadian hockey's really done because
the Maple Leafs haven't done anything since before I was born. And I was born in 74. When did they win the last time? 67? It's been so long. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's been so long. And it's like, look, we know the Canadians are the Yankees of hockey. Okay. They've had multiple championships. And then when are we going to, at some point, see Toronto Maple Leafs really, get over the hump? I don't know. They still have a curse on them. But, still, I mean, the Blue Jays, I loved it the year from, 92, 93 when Joe Carter wins that, with World Series with the home run. And it just lifted everybody north of the border all on their feet because
it was what happened when the Raptors won.
Yeah.
My friend was working up in Toronto that year, and he took a video from his apartment building because he was up, I think, by Bloor Street in Toronto. And you just heard a roar of people. He was up on like a really high floor of a luxury building. And he's like, yeah, they're going a little crazy right now with the championship. And I was at a pool hall the night that Joe Carter hit the home run. And I had to explain to all my non-sports friends why I was freaking out. Because I at that point, I had never seen a walk-off home run to win a World Series. And it was amazing. And I said, well, this is what happened. I explained everything. They're like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. I was like, yeah, it is pretty cool.
Yeah. So, it is interesting because, in a couple minutes to wrap up, but the Astros, they won the World Series last year. And I know a lot of look, I've told people, I said, all right, look, I know the narrative. I was on that train for a bit. I still have my personal feelings of them, but Carlos Correa is not there in Houston. So he's missed out on that championship run. But I do love Jeremy Pena and a lot of those young kids. But it's just like the Astros. They've obviously got a target on their backs. A lot of teams in the American League want to really get past them because they become that face where they're great in their farm system. They're great at all of these things, and they attract a lot of free agents. How did when going into the playoffs, how do the Yankees really have to tackle this thing? Because I know in the American League, outside of the Central, because the Central is just so wonky, but you watch the AL West and then of course the AL East. How do they really have to tackle this on, in the playoffs? Because it's like the Astros still are the team to beat.
The Yankees need to have a different manager in the playoffs. Maybe they can rent someone for the playoffs because they wouldn't have been swept if Aaron Boone didn't make some of those weird choices that he made. It would have been at least 2 games that the Yankees could have won if he didn't be Aaron Boone. And I didn't want him in the first place. He's a nice guy. I'm not going to say anything bad about Aaron Boone, but at this point, we really need someone else in there because I don't feel like the Yankees will ever get over the hump with him as the manager. They could have the best roster in baseball, and he will find a way to screw it up in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my personal feeling about that.
Yeah, and I almost thought about this because, and I don't know if this really would work, but hypothetically speaking, what if the chances that if the money was, if the money spoke, that Don Mattingly would be back as a Yankee?
I know. I can't believe he's going to be with the Blue Jays. That is going to be so weird to watch. He was my favorite player growing up. Yeah. I wanted to name my first child Mattingly. Never had a child, but if I did, he or she would have been named Mattingly. That's how much I love that man. And to know that he's going to be like the Marlins wasn't a big deal. Dodgers wasn't a big deal. I was happy for him, even though I was taught by my dad at a young age to not like the Dodgers, the Red Sox, or the Royals because, late 70s kind of thing. But to see him in a Toronto uniform is going to be, I don't know. I feel like if he does come back to New York as a manager, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him, even though he has a lot more experience now. But I feel like he would really be under the microscope because he's Don Mattingly and he hasn't won a ring, and the pressure of him needing to win a ring because they won the ring the year after he left. And I think it would be too much for him.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, he's known this New York franchise for years, and especially with the years that he's gone on with several championship teams, and guys around him, they respect him. They know his his play style and his game. I feel like too that it really could help with as far as their hitting style, because
True.
it's not really always home run or nothing. I mean, there's got to be points where you got to score in runs, you got to get
Yeah.
on base, and so I feel like that could be that possibility, but I still think it would be a great watch because back into, in pinstripes and, back where it really all it began and started. So, why not? But
Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think he'd be fine because I mean, when he played with the Yankees, he was playing under a cognizant George Steinbrenner who still had his marbles, and he had to deal
Yeah.
with that. So, yeah, I think maybe he could be okay because
Yeah.
Hal's not like that. If Hank, God rest his soul, if he were the owner, he'd be more like his dad, where Hal is a lot more relaxed and not. He didn't get those George genes. He must take after his mother. So
Yeah.
I think actually things would be better for Tom Mattingly if he came around now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then he would have, sole control. I mean, and you kind of have to have that as a manager, because I look at baseball now and it's like, first of all, I don't want my GM making decisions of who I have in the lineup, because
Which is
first of
what's
all,
happening. Yeah.
yeah, because what was the old school of, like, you looked at the lineup, who had the hot hand, who the balance in the battery was in that lineup, because ultimately it's like that's what built you championship rosters, is because of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, first of all, you wouldn't even be telling this to Billy Martin in this time,
I was
because Billy
thinking
Martin
about
would
that.
literally tell you, go F yourself. Like
That's exactly who I was thinking of when you were saying that. I was like, Billy Martin. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, no, there's so many great fond memories. I mean, that's interesting with the Royals. It's funny because, I mean, like my stepdad, he played in high school ball and was really good. And his backup catcher just so happens to be the Kansas City Royals Hall of Famer, Mike Sweeney. I
Oh,
was his
wow.
backup catcher at the time before, a horrendous injury, really took him off sides. And then, Sweeney goes and does his thing. And then he's, an all-timer, with Kansas City. But yeah, always love, and baseball's always been a great pedigree. My mom my mom's originally from Long Island up in Smithtown, and she loved Craig Biggio. I mean, a guy that, absolutely loved him. And, she watched, the 86 Mets win the World Series at the time before, changing and going to pinstripes, because the Yankee way just kind of felt really like the way to go at the time. So, but she loved it. She loved Gary Carter. She loved Tug McGraw and a lot of those guys there at that time. But yeah,
Yeah, that was a rough time for me. My homeroom teacher that year was a Met fan, and he asked us the first day of school, which baseball team do you like? And only 2 of us answered Yankees, and he tortured us that entire fall. You can still become a Mets fan. I was like, no, I'm not becoming a Mets fan. And then 10 years later, I was like, see, this is why I didn't become a Mets fan.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, I'm not going to the other side of things, but I will say though, I love watching the Subway Series with the both of them. But I mean, you have to admit, those dark jerseys of the Mets, anytime they play the Yankees, you just feel some type of way. Every
Because
time
it
on
takes
the
you back to the late 90s and early
Oh
2000s. Like you feel
god,
like it's
yeah.
that era again. Yeah.
Piazza against Jeter, and yeah, I loved it. I could go on for hours, but hey. Really good talking with you, Stacey. Where can everybody find you for Locked On Yankees? Because this is going to be an interesting year for the Bronx, that's for sure.
Yeah. You can find us on every podcasting platform available. We're on YouTube. Me and my producer, Steve. We both have the same initials. I'm Stacey Gotsulias. He's Steve Granado. It's kind of funny. You can find us on Twitter at Locked On Yankees, all one word. We're on Instagram at Locked On Yankees, all one word. And I made a TikTok, but I haven't done anything on it yet, but I'm thinking during the season, maybe instant reactions to games I might put up on TikTok, which could be funny depending on what happens during the game.
Okay, seriously, I've literally have been tempted several times to making a TikTok, because everybody's like, well, you produce a great content. Why not get on TikTok? I can't fall into it, because I know a lot of people that get on TikTok and they never come out.
So
And
you
I'm
never
like,
do. No, I was
they-
scrolling for 4 hours this morning. It's so bad. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm still tempted. It has not hit the thought on me yet, but yeah, I mean, at some point, I mean, yeah, especially for great, producing of content and the rest of it, I understand it, but I don't know. It's going to take a lot out of me to really, break that threshold. But
Right.
great talking with you, Stacey. Great stuff, and hope to see exactly how the Yankees do this season. Take care of yourself. Have the rest of your weekend there, and yeah, we'll see what this year really has in store for those Yankees.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is going to be interesting watching. I love baseball season all around. I can't complain. Anytime I go to the ballpark and anytime, especially out here in Vegas, we have the Aviators, but still, it is true because are they really low payroll teams? Which is kind of interesting. And I say this because the Oakland A's, they don't have a game plan. They don't really have a game plan in Oakland. And I keep hearing it with the mayor of Oakland talking, badly about Vegas. Look, I know how this town is. It's make it or break it. But still, I look at, first of all, it's another entertainment purpose. It's also something, too, that the payroll really will rise up. I mean, what makes you think that this town would not thrive in baseball? Dodgers, Braves, Cubs, Angels, Yankees. Are you kidding me? Like, all these big money payroll guys would kill to literally, play games here, especially too. All of the money making is all out there in the casinos, and you don't think some of these big time money owners would not go to several casinos, spend their money up, and then all of a sudden the economy's booming and all the rest of it? Like, you really don't think that's going to end up happening if baseball came here? Come on, let's get real. But ultimately, it's real good stuff. Alrighty, folks, that's going to do it here for the Snake Sports Talk Show. I appreciate everybody who's joined in earlier and, of course, who still has been hanging out with me all throughout the day. Appreciate every single one of you guys. Like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell button for all latest notifications to keep you up to date on future and past shows. Live everywhere, iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram. Tomorrow, we've got ourselves a great one. We've got Matt Kazi of Locked on Cubs that's going to be joining us, and several more. And we've also got Landon Oliver from the Blue Stable talking about the Colts and the scouting combine and so much more coming up on the NFL side. But I appreciate everybody who joined in early. This is Jake the Snake Silva signing off. Have a great rest of the Saturday and the rest of the weekend, and we'll see you tomorrow on the next edition of the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, guys.